Hey, Rising Church, welcome to round 5 of Groves. I hope you guys are off to a great start already as we continue diving into First Peter and kind of looking for nuggets of wisdom on what we can apply to our lives and how we can live differently and how we can live kind of lives that kind of stand out in a world that may be dark and may be going against God. What does it look like to follow God and to be different? And so today we're going to be coming to a section of the book that it might be a little bit of a struggle for some of us. We're going to talk about words like submit. We're going to talk about slavery, talk about marriage, and some of these things that might be controversial. What do we do with government figures and authorities, and how do we relate to them as followers of Jesus? And so I know it's going to be tough. I know it might be a little bit controversial, and we're going to kind of dive into it. And it's kind of one of those sections that, to be honest with you, there's no way for me to cover in an 8-minute video or even in a 45-minute sermon. It's just so packed in there with stuff to discuss and talk about. But I want to give you what I think is kind of the key. It's kind of like a decoder, if you will. Like if you take this one passage and you kind of apply it to everything you're going to be reading, it's going to help you decode and understand kind of what's really being said here so that you don't misinterpret and kind of go down some wrong threads. And that's found in 1 Peter chapter 2. There's kind of two in a row that kind of, to me, really make this thing come clear. And it's verse 12. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. That's the first key. How are we supposed to live? We're supposed to live such good lives among the non-believers in the midst of this world that doesn't agree with us, that we live differently. We live such good lives, our good deeds, that they would see something different in us. And then here's the next key, verse 13. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority. For the Lord's sake. It's kind of this word submit. And I know that's a tough one for us to swallow. We don't even like it. It's even in one of our kind of the commitments and that we make as a member or partner of Rising Church, that we will submit to the loving leadership of the elders. And it's just kind of like, even that word, when we were talking about it, we're like, submit. I just don't like that word. And we've unpacked this word before in other series. So I just want to give you a brief overview of it. It simply means to arrange yourself under. It's kind of to arrange under, like to yield to something else. It's to say, you know what, I'm going to put this thing above myself, which is kind of what we're called to as believers of Jesus. It means I'm going to arrange myself under this other thing. That's what it means. And he says, again, this is the key to understand everything we're about to read, submit yourselves. He's like, this is a choice you need to make. This is not a submit like I'm going to yield to others because I'm being forced to. I'm choosing to arrange myself under these other authorities or these under things for the Lord's sake. For the sake of the Lord, for the benefit of the Lord, because of Jesus, I am willing to submit and arrange myself under these other things, these human authorities, these human creations. That's what the word means. These ideas that man has made up for the Lord's sake. Not for my sake, not for society's sake, but on account of my relationship with the Lord. And so we're going to take that kind of, to me, that little nugget and apply it, because I think for a lot of us, we struggle with authority. We struggle with submitting to authorities and powers, especially if we don't agree with them, whether that be at school, at work, in our country, in our nation, just in general. We kind of like, as independent Americans, we just kind of don't really like that idea of submitting to somebody else, which is why our nation was formed in the first place. And so we kind of struggle with this idea, and we kind of struggle with that. And kind of the reality is we need government. And although we may not, I would say kind of like almost any form of government is better than absolutely no government. I think we've seen that over the last few years. Like what happens when you just say no, there's no authorities, there's no powers, there's no police, there's nobody doing anything. Like, I don't know if you want to live in that society where nobody follows any rules. Everybody does whatever is right in their own heart and mind. I remember I was driving the other day. I was coming down the street, and there was kind of this one spot on Shadburn Ferry where it's kind of a sketchy little spot because it's like the train track is right there, and there's this really sharp hill, and you can't see over this one curve, and there's a stop sign right at the top of it. And so I'm coming up to the stop sign on this blind drop right next to this cliff, and I stop at the stop sign behind another car, and this car behind me decides, I don't want to stop. And it literally goes over the double yellow, or whatever is at that point, crosses over into the left lane to bypass both of us at the stop sign, going over a hill, or a blind hill, going straight into oncoming traffic, and just chooses to go around us. What happens if we live in a world where everybody does that? That's just kind of a scary place. We were at Knott's Berry Farm with the students for our Mexico mission trip at the very end, and we're standing in line, and like waiting in line for the roller coaster, and we see all these people like cutting in line. And they're just kind of like doing their own thing. They don't care. They're like, hey, we can get ahead of people. We're just going to cut in line. And it was interesting because I read just like a few days after that it became such a problem that they were starting to have all these fights that they literally they made this rule at Knott's Berry Farm that no teenager and nobody under 17 could even come into the park without somebody over 18 on a weekend because they're having so many issues with kids just saying, I'm just going to do whatever I want. There's no authority. Nobody can do anything. If you're a teacher, if there's no authority in the school and kids can do whatever they want, it's not a good situation, right? And so God has created governance. God has created authorities for our benefit. God doesn't, create these things to punish us. He creates them for our benefit. And so these kind of rules and authorities, and even though they're human, God has established authority that we need to follow. And he's saying, listen, as a follower of Jesus, now that you're free, does that mean you can just do whatever you want? And you can just ignore whatever government figures, ignore the police, ignore whatever else, and just do whatever you want? He's saying, no. For the Lord's sake, on account of Jesus, because of Jesus, he's saying you need to arrange yourself under these authorities. And so we're going to kind of unpack that in these three different areas when it comes to governance or government, when it comes to work, or when he's talking about slaves, which was a very common thing back in the day, or if he's talking about even in your marriage, he's saying, how do you arrange yourself under these authorities so that you can live life, a good, pleasing life that ultimately they're going to see your good deeds and they're going to glorify God on the day he visits us. So again, I know this is going to be a tough one. I know that's maybe a lot to swallow, and maybe you're already kind of like, no, I don't want to talk about this. But hopefully as we kind of sharpen each other and we unpack some of these ideas, it's going to help us with this key of submitting yourselves for the Lord's sake. It's going to help us to understand what Peter is saying here. So I hope that will kind of give you something to chew on as you begin the discussion. Hopefully you'll understand this idea, and it will help us to walk out our faith in a world that can often be crazy. So until next week, we will see you next time.